Hi, we're back again with the Dewey Bredeson podcast, and we're here to talk this time about voter suppression and redistricting. So, Dewey, can you just give us a little bit of background on your thoughts on these situations, and also why is this such an important issue for you?
Okay. Voter suppression, I believe it's undemocratic. It's an attack on our civil liberties. It calls into question legitimacy of the election. And it is a big problem in Wisconsin, and we can get more into that.
And what is the cause of this? Who is doing this, and how do we fight it so that it stops happening and doesn't happen again?
Okay, so every 10 years, according to the Constitution, we need to redistrict all the voting districts because the population changes, and that's why that's one of the reasons that we do the census every 10 years is to redistrict. So it is, in our Constitution, it's our law that we need to do that. And then different states do it different ways, but Wisconsin is done by the legislature. So in Wisconsin, it's done by the legislature, which has been controlled by the Republicans 10 years ago. And they redistrict it such that they load up 80% of one district will be Democratic, and then 60% of this other district will be Republican. And thus you lump all the Democrats together. And it makes it so that more Republicans get elected, even though there's fewer Republicans.
So who is this impacting the most? I mean, is it impacting both parties, or is it certain people, certain status in the economy that it's affecting, or?
Well, it tends to impact Democratic voters. It tends to impact people of color. It tends to impact lower income folks.
Okay. And what can we do? What can you do when elected to this seat to stop this from happening?
Well, it's going to be difficult because the legislature will still be controlled by the Republicans. However, the governor will be Democratic, so it's most likely going to go to the courts if it can't be figured out how to do this bipartisanly. What I would like to really see happen, though, is a nonpartisan commission set up draw the district lines in the future. And so that's really the only fair way to do it. In 2018, in Wisconsin, 45% of the voters elected 68% of the seats. So that's not really fair. It's not one vote.
Right, one for one. It's not proportionate.
It dilutes your votes.
In regards to the committee, you just talked about getting them together, bipartisan, to kind of restructure. How do you go about making that happen, being in the state assembly for this district?
Well, it's the legislature that decides how it is to be, we redistrict it. The legislature also has the power to change the rules as to how we do redistricting in the future. And so the next 2 years, we will be working on redistricting. So it's going to be a big issue.
For you, Dewey, why is this one of your main focuses? Why does this mean so much to you?
Because it's not fair the way it's done. It's undemocratic. It's an attack on our civil liberties, and it calls into questions the legitimacy of the election.
And what can voters do, your average person, what can they do to fight this? Because many of us know this is happening, so what can we do?
We can elect legislatures that want to have a fair way to redistrict.
Basically, using their power of the vote.
Correct. They can vote for me.
That's right. All right, Dewey, can you please talk to us a little bit more about how voter suppression is happening in Wisconsin currently?
Sure. There's harsh voter ID laws in Wisconsin where people have to bring their ID in order to vote. And affects people of color and minorities quite a bit more. It also especially affects students, who I have quite a few of in my district, as they are not able to use their student ID to vote. And then for lower income folks, they need to have a driver's license. And if they lose their driver's license, it's expensive to replace. They may not have a driver's license. There are other ways around this. However, it's complicated and it suppresses the vote. The other thing is the Republicans have been restricting early voting hours, especially in Milwaukee and Madison, which tend to have more voters, and they want to make it uniform throughout the state so that a small community has, if they can't afford to have longer voting hours or earlier voting hours, they want to affect the voters of more populous areas where it's more difficult to find time to vote. They're changing the law regarding absentee ballots, making it harder to vote by absentee ballots. They're changing polling regulations, which really affects in this time of COVID. It's harder to find polling workers,
Right.
Who are fearful they might get sick if they work in the polls, and they tend to be elderly people.
Yeah,
so it's harder to find polling workers at this time. They're also working to purge the voter list. There's 230,000 names that they are trying to purge, mostly from Dane County and Milwaukee.
And what is purging
Which tend
mean?
to be,
What does that mean, the purging?
they want to remove those names from the voting list, from the registered voting list. And so when you come in to vote, you have to re-register.
Awesome, Dewey. Thank you so much. This has been the Dewey Bredeson podcast. If you would like to know more about how to vote for Dewey, go to his website at vote.deweyforassembly.com. Next week, we will talk about K through 12 funding.